Imagine a cozy cafe. Everything's dark oak wood and inviting. It smells of freshly baked cinnamon rolls and freshly brewed coffee. There are books on display and a cat sleeping soundly on the counter. The place is filled with peace and calm, and there are people enjoying their drinks while reading or writing. There are no computers or phones to be seen. It's as if time has stopped and there is nowhere to rush. In another room, there's a small group of people engaged in a quiet conversation, making new connections and learning new things. It's a friendly atmosphere of a tight-knit community that welcomes anyone new. The entire space is filled with magic. Magic that comes from books, chocolate, and mysteriously good bakes, but also from friendship, good conversation, and the cats who always keep you company and deliver exactly what you need. Welcome back to the Cat Coach Cafe. Me and the cat coaches, Aragorn, Apricot, and Prince, are thrilled to have you back. This is a place to slow down, connect with the seasons, and to share our love for all things cats and books. In today's episode, we're gonna share some beautiful November traditions and rituals, as well as talk to our very first guest, author and bibliotherapist Bijal Shah, about the healing power of books. So definitely stay tuned for that one, as we will share some beautiful cat-themed book tips as well. Once again, I'd like to encourage you to take this time just for yourself and do not multitask. Just cozy up, have your favorite hot drink ready, and relax while listening to today's episode. If you don't have your drink ready, now is the time to get one, as we are once again going to start with a short drink meditation. So if you need to, pause the podcast and come back when you have your drink ready. Take your drink and close your eyes. Hug your mug with the palms of your hands. Feel its warmth. Is it too hot, maybe? Or is it pleasantly warm? Notice the warmth travel through your body, from your palms to your arms, all the way to your soul. Feel it. Feel the warmth. Now, take the mug and bring it closer to your lips, but do not drink just yet. Just inhale the scent of your drink deeply and let it fill you with the wonder and magic of the faraway lands the ingredients come from. Or perhaps images of your very own garden, if that's where your tea comes from. What images do come to your mind when you smell your drink? Can you see any colors, shapes, precise images? Notice it all. Let your imagination run wild. Now take another deep inhale, taking in all the scent your drink has to offer, and let it fill you with peace and warmth. Take another deep inhale and then hold your breath at the peak of your inhale just for a few seconds, keeping in all the beautiful scents as well. And then exhale. Now, with your eyes still closed, take a sip. Notice the taste, notice the flavor, and let it wash over your whole being. How does it make you feel? Take another sip and do the same. Beautiful. Now you are ready to open your eyes. Now that we slowed down, let's tune into the season. We have officially entered the dark part of the year. As we have celebrated the end of harvest last night with Halloween, and thus what used to be considered the beginning of winter, today we are standing at the start of New Year. This was true for the Celtic, Slavic, as well as Germanic tradition, which split the year into two halves. The dark half starting at the turn of October and November, and the light half beginning at the end of April. The New Year cycle brings about many mysterious creatures and spirits who will accompany us until spring as we wait for the light to return. This dark part of the year used to be a time when people gathered and shared stories, and oftentimes quite chilling ones. They featured spirits and ghosts and many superstitious beliefs. It's from this time of the year, the time between November and February, when most traditions, which were passed down from generation to generation, were recorded as people spent a lot of time together in their homes, which helped them face the pitfalls of winter and to keep their spirits up. At the beginning of November, we continue celebrating the dead. Halloween is followed by All Saints' Day in the Christian Church, and on November 2nd is All Souls' Day, dedicated to our loved ones who are no longer with us. In the Czech Republic, people travel to cemeteries across all of the country to honor their loved ones. They light up candles and leave green wreath on the graves. The round shape of the wreath symbolizes a soul that is eternal, and this age-old tradition survived until today. Rather than being sad when remembering our loved ones, though, this is a perfect opportunity to share some of our memories. Flick through old photos, get crafty and create a family tree, or simply share a family tradition and tell your kids how you honor it and thus honor your ancestors. Share some family stories. Give thanks to your ancestors for your life and for the journey they've been on, which allowed you to be here today. What is your favorite memory of someone who is no longer here? How did they inspire your life? Or how did they influence it? Are you living their legacy in any way? And if not, could you somehow continue some tradition, perhaps, even giving it your own flavor or twist? These are some great questions to ponder on or journal on. So if you feel inspired to do so, feel free to pause the podcast and come back when you're ready, or come back to the questions later. It's totally up to you. Traditionally, All Souls' Day is also accompanied by special treats. These could be both sweet or savory. It was a custom that people shared these homemade sourdough pastries with children and those in need, as they believed these gifts will not only help those in need, but they will also bring good fortune to their own homes especially in form of good harvest the following year. All Souls Day could also serve as a great reminder to enjoy our time with our loved ones here and now. Be truly present and focus on what matters. Make time for the people in your life, hug them a little tighter, tell them you love them and what they mean to you, as you never know what tomorrow brings. And this goes for both people and pets. And on that note, Aragorn has something to say. It is especially important to enjoy the company of those that we love, because a day will come that they will no longer be with us, or at least not in the form we're used to, which is why I love the end of October and the beginning of November even more. Because at this time of the year, people and cats all around the world remember and celebrate those who are no longer here. Mexicans believe that between October 31st and November 2nd, my human told me that, the gates to the other world, whatever that means, open, and those who died come to celebrate with us. As long as we have their photos up and they are not forgotten. This led my human to put up a photo of my little brother Cinnamon, which finally assured me that I'm a perfectly healthy cat and I wasn't hallucinating when I was younger, as there truly have been 4 of us, not 3. We never talked about Cinnamon with my brothers, and so I grew unsure of whether he actually existed or if I just made him up. And of course, I was too scared to ask my brothers if they remembered him, because in case I was indeed imagining him, they would tease me for it for the rest of my life. And I certainly did not want that, nor to look silly. But it did teach me a lesson. I have spoken to my brothers about Cinnamon since, and it turned out Apricot, being a ginger as was Cinnamon, was too heartbroken to talk about him and too scared that if he mentioned him, he might somehow disappear too. And Prince, same as me, was just unsure if he was real. I mean, Prince's imagination surely is wild, so I don't blame him that he was unsure of himself. In my case, it would have been a bigger surprise, but yeah, sometimes life makes you doubt yourself. All our fears, both the fear and grief in Apricot's case, as well as mine and Prince's fear of looking silly, got in the way of a much more important bit though, which was remembering Cinnamon and sharing stories about him. Because that's the only way to keep someone in our hearts, and it's such a silly mistake not to do so. We should celebrate and honor their life, because no matter how difficult that might be for us, pretending that it never happened is far worse. Cinnamon deserves to be remembered. He was our brother. He is our brother, and we loved him. And hiding from our grief is doing him no justice. We must face our grief, because through facing it and feeling it, we will heal. And through sharing stories about him, we will heal also. And what's more, we will keep him alive in our hearts. We must talk about those who are no longer with us, because that is the only way to keep them alive. Surely we don't want them to die again, this time in our hearts. Plus, if you believe what those people with funny heads do, it will also keep your loved ones alive on the other side. And I sure do want that, because then Cinnamon can come over to party with us once more, even if he comes in a funny ghostly shape. I don't want to see Apricot's face when that happens, though. But anyway, don't mind Apricot and get your photos up and prepare your stories to share with your loved ones. Not the teary ones, but those that spark joy, those that best represent those that we lost, because each life should be celebrated, no matter how short. Poor Cinnamon was with us only for 3 months, but he changed us forever, and he will always remain the missing part. But one day, we will all be reunited again. That is, if we keep remembering him. And we will. We do. So keep a grateful heart. Don't let your grief win. Life is to be enjoyed, especially if we're so lucky to be here and others are not. You can read the full Cat Coach Diaries Facing Grief with Grateful Heart at catcoachdiaries.substack.com. Now, before we get into some more traditions and rituals for the second week of November and talk about St. Martin's Day and the World Kindness Day, let's have a little break and invite our first guest. Since November encourages us to surrender to the world of stories, there really isn't a better time to read. And therefore, no better time to talk to Bijal Shah. Bijal is a bibliotherapist, counselor, and author of Bibliotherapy, The Healing Power of Reading. She's the founder of Book Therapy, which offers bibliotherapy sessions, literary curation, imagine that, and bibliotherapy training. Bijal's book recommendations have featured in The Guardian, BBC Culture, Marie Claire, Psychologies Magazine, Good Housekeeping, and many other. Above anything, though, Bijal herself is an avid book lover as well as cat lover, so I was super excited to dive into our conversation about all things books and cats. Every bookworm wants to hear that reading books is healthy. I think we all know it deep down, but having that confirmed by science is just music to the ears of every book lover. But before we get to all that, could you share with us your personal story? Were you always a bookworm yourself, or how did that all start for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I grew up in Nairobi in Kenya, East Africa, and as part of a Jain community there, which is like this very niche kind of religion that's similar to Hinduism and Buddhism. But you know, it's in a lot of places in the world it would be unheard of because it's got a very small population. But yeah, it was quite an orthodox community, and I do talk about it in the book as well. But it was one where I've really struggled to discuss things with my parents or with friends or with the wider community, as you would do in any sort of really religious community, because you just look to scripture for guidance and that's it. Um, and a lot of things were shameful to talk about, I guess. So for me, the easiest thing would be to turn to a book. And, I wouldn't even be doing it like, oh, let me go and read this book and I'll find out something about it. It was just a natural kind of escape, something that I was just always drawn to numb some of the everyday
Mm,
challenges of life or difficulties. And we had this really lovely library, community library, and I'd always be find myself there most days. And I think, that's when this sort of relationship between reading developed, where they books really became my therapeutic agents, I guess, or anchors and supporters. And I discovered so much novelty in them, things that I'd never come across before, and I think all of that really drew me into the book, into just sticking with this library habit that I had and turning to books whenever I needed to. So, it was always there in the back of my mind that as a coping strategy. And then I obviously went, I carried on with further education and qualified as an accountant at university, like in work, and I did a master's degree at university. And, I've always felt like something was missing in my life. And that missing piece was sort of the psychology aspect of things. I really was interested in psychology, which and how people worked. And I never really had that in banking. Like, it was very much about money and finance and numbers
mm,
and just dealing with really alpha types. And I really wanted to explore this counseling and psychology aspect more. So I ended up doing a part-time diploma whilst working in banking. And during that time, during my training, I had to see a counselor. And during those special moments between, in those counseling sessions is when I started using books again, because I felt like they were my natural coping strategies and I could really talk about situations through the use of a book, because they always had the context, they had the language, or they had the expression that I was looking for. And then, that just led me to a conversation with my therapist. And I mean, I discussed the details of this in the book, but I ended up diving into a bit of a rabbit hole as to why I was always so soothed by books, and discovered this whole like bibliotherapy practice of bibliotherapy, which, it's still very opaque and hidden in university papers or archives or history. It's not something that's really come to the forefront. And the goal with the book and with my practice and everything was really to raise awareness of bibliotherapy and all the research that I'd discovered and the conversations that had led me to, because I started talking to other people who'd been heavily researching the subject, or who'd done a lot of work in that space, and discovered like this whole practice of bibliotherapy and this methodology and some of the parallels that PhD students had drawn with Freudian psychotherapy, and yeah, and also just modern day studies of how books have been a vehicle to theory of mind and empathy building, etc. And so, yeah, I think that's been like the whole story in terms of this sort of path where books are the center of everything that I do. Um,
But
and
it wasn't really until you sat down with your counselor that you realized, right? Like
yeah,
mindfully realize what are books actually doing for you. It was more like an escapism before, I understand. Or
yeah, definitely. An escapism, a sense of being understood, validation, especially as a woman, because it was hard to get that level of validation in the communities that were so male dominated. I know it's only in the book where you've got a female narrator or somebody speaking to
mm,
experience that you suddenly feel seen. And that's probably one of the big draws of books, right? It's just you go there and you feel seen, and then you keep going back because it's meeting that need of feeling visible, of somebody understanding, and then feeling empowered that, yeah, maybe I can communicate this to someone else and maybe they'll see me too. And, all of these things. And I think I started to piece together that the experience I had with books to actually a language that was capturing it. And then I could then start leveraging off that language, and communicating that with others that, look, this is what books can do for you. Because there's four stages to this, which is very much the identification that you feel with the text or the narrator, the connection you feel that allows you to explore some of your emotions, some of your own experiences in a safe space. And then the feelings that then come up, leading to catharsis, to that release of that emotional tension all of a sudden, which you've never been able to express before. Because it's not just about saying, oh, the book is talking about this feeling and I also resonate with this feeling. It's more really being able to express feelings that you've never been able to do so before. I mean, that is the sort of strict and unique definition of catharsis. And highlighting your blind spots that you've never been aware of, before. Oh, actually, gosh, yeah, I do that. Or I do project this onto other people, you know, highlighting things like that.
yeah. That's very true. That happened to me so many times in books. And also how you talked about the four phases, the four different phases of like identification first. That really brings me to thinking like, especially in the self-help environment, they always say like, there's nothing new that you can write. Like everything has been said, but that doesn't mean
Yeah.
there's no point for writing your story because there are people who will identify with your unique story. And that's so true because there are books that, even though they speak about the topics I'm interested in, they don't really speak to me, but it's the unique experience of the author that I can identify with that actually then it sinks in. So it was really
Yes.
interesting for me reading about these four phases and especially the identification sort of because I felt like, that makes perfect sense. But I'm jumping ahead. So before we confuse our listeners even more, let's get to the nitty-gritty details about bibliotherapy so they understand what it is that we're actually talking about and how can we benefit from reading and make it work for us.
It's really the use of literature as a therapeutic tool. So using the literature as a prompt to maybe see what it's bringing up for you as you're reading, noting down the observations that's coming up for you, the reflections that are coming up for you, and taking that to a mental health professional, or if you're practicing self-bibliotherapy, really journaling and writing these reflections down and then going back to them later and seeing if you still feel the same and trying to make sense of what you've just written down or highlighted to gain some insights. Essentially that is bibliotherapy. It's that resonance that you feel like, why is this character making me feel angry, or why do I feel so much connection to this? Is it because I'm seeing myself through that character? Is it because they're speaking to my experience and now there's suddenly somebody here who's affirming what's happened to me? Is it because they're carrying my feelings for me? All these things um, that are giving you clues into what you might want to look into next, or what you might want to explore further. Um,
Or
because
even
it's
like, is this something that I want for myself? Like, finding
yes, yeah.
inspiration and
Yeah,
courage.
inspiration, exactly. Courage, inspiration, novelty, a new perspective.
Yeah.
Um, which, sometimes as much as I think talk therapy is wonderful, your therapist, you will never may never be able to give you that source of identification that a book
Mm,
will, you
yeah.
know, and that immediately puts you into a safer space, immediately starts to relax your defenses, immediately allows you to connect with something that you might have been struggling with before, because you're not talking about yourself directly. You might be talking about the issue through another character, and it's giving you that safety. Um, and courage, I guess, to talk about it, to think about it, to go back into that trauma without it feeling so overwhelming, So it does carry all that weight and that space to explore things in more depth.
What I
Um,
find when I read and I didn't know about bibliotherapy until very recently, that books literally help me understand myself better. And I
yeah,
never taken it so seriously though, as I know now, like I call it now mindful reading. Like you ask yourself these questions, you journal, you go back to why is this making me feel that way? Just like you said, it's like next level. And I haven't started doing that yet, but I will
yeah,
because I can totally
yeah.
see like how incredibly powerful that can be.
Yes, yeah, literary journaling, as I call it. But that practice of writing things down, that therapeutic practice is so powerful. And even just writing things down is that you're expressing your emotions, you're bringing them out of your body onto page, and that alone is so effective. And then the other things that it brings to the page, all the awareness, right? And then the
Yeah.
insights, the other side. So there's a lot of power in that pen and in holding that space for yourself. And also it's an aspect of creativity. And I always feel like creativity and healing go hand in hand. You
Yeah, for
can't
sure. Yeah.
you can't really heal without some, I mean, you can, but I feel like creativity is such an important part of the healing process. And sometimes in traditional therapy, we don't always get that,
Mm. Yeah.
which this brings forward.
I mean, automatic writing itself brings so much clarity, right? Like I do
Yeah,
that every morning and sometimes I'm amazed what comes through. So just like
yeah,
when you combine these things, like the things you realize while reading books and then combine it with this sort of automatic writing is just, it must be like magic happening,
Yeah,
literally.
it can feel like that, honestly. Like I think the one word that always comes up for me is resolved. You feel very
Yeah,
resolved, right? You've
yeah.
written things down, you've made sense of it, things are more clear, agency, all these things that sometimes get missed, if yeah, sometimes they can get missed if you're just focused on the problem itself and that's it.
And I, for
Um,
myself, have to say that whenever I have one of these moments like of clarity, that something clicked, that I understand something through that
yeah,
writing, it makes me so excited, whatever it
yeah,
is, even if it's something, not necessarily like super good, but the fact that I understood something that was like very deep down in me
yeah,
is just, I feel so happy suddenly,
yeah,
even if, yeah,
yeah. It's bringing forward
yeah,
emotions that you couldn't because they were over, overpowered by these other emotions that needed
yeah,
attention. Yeah, yeah, 100%. I think it's a different way of working with yourself
yeah.
that we don't often do. So it's really key, like leveraging your reading for what it can be as well.
Yeah, and that also sort of validates all the different genres of books and their existence because every different things will speak to different people in different life situations. Like myself, I used to have so much prejudice against like simple romance, that type of predictable, overly romantic type of stories. And then I got into a difficult life situation and suddenly, these books were all I needed. They literally saved me. And yet, I haven't had the need to return to the genre since, because that was just something I needed back then. Really, like, clicked for me again when I was reading your book that, yeah, it's just another form of therapy. And that's why people are attracted to it, even if they don't realize, probably.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I mean, the structure, the like the happy ending.
Yeah,
There's a sense of you know what to expect. There's a level of control that you have when you're reading. The structure, it allows you to feel safe to explore
yeah,
because you know that the uncertainty piece is not there, and you can just read and yeah, and just feel safe. That safety. And then of course the books must have been giving you something.
yeah.
Um, an unmet need and if it's doing that then that's wonderful because it's giving you something back that you need at that time and for that reason I always encourage people that if don't be ashamed about what you're reading because there's a purpose and just go with it because if that's what you need it for then that and explore that see what it's
Yeah.
bringing up for you how can you develop that further what else can you what other clarity awareness can you get um and then what are next steps what are insights that you can get from that as well so all of those things
That's
but
exactly what I felt when I started reading those books back then. Like I was ashamed of actually reading them, and they were really making me feel so good. Like it was like in the difficulties I was facing, that was like, yeah, here there were happy endings in this world, and I needed some happy endings basically.
yeah
So
yeah
yeah,
yeah 100% I think life can be so bittersweet
mm,
sometimes and it's
yeah.
like I think sometimes we just need that.
I always say because I come from a film background, I studied film. And I
Okay.
always I always used to say like that was the same basically with films. Like don't be ashamed of the films you watch and that you
Yeah,
like, because every film was initially written by someone with a real experience. So there
yes,
is something of that person in that story. Like there is some bits of real story that you can identify with. So
exactly,
yeah,
exactly. And storytelling, you know, before we had language, I think storytelling was probably our first language, right?
yeah,
Because it was the language of the subconscious, through which you made sense of the world. So it's not surprising that we're drawn to it in different mediums. Yeah.
How can reading help with stress?
Yeah, I mean, so this is one of the other benefits aside from the sort of um emotional catharsis and release of pent-up feelings. Books are massively helpful in reducing stress. And in fact, there was a recent study done by the University of Sussex of like how even just reading 6 minutes a day can reduce your stress levels by 68%. And that was more than, going for a walk or playing tennis or having a cup of tea or, it's just or listening to music. I think there was such a powerful aspect of how much it calms down our nervous system. That
Is it because we escape our reality and we're transported?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's like a form of meditate. I always believe that reading is like a form of meditation because you're so
Yeah,
focused on
yeah,
one thing. You're out of your head. You're kind of not paying
yeah,
attention to any of that, any of the negative voices or chatter.
yeah.
So, I think it probably has a similar effect. And
Hmm.
so for people like me who I cannot do meditation, but I can definitely read, it's definitely my go-to
Hmm.
source. But it has reading also has so many other benefits like building empathy, and theory of mind. And we talked about validation as well. It on so many levels, it's so positive for communities at large, if they can get, their members to read more. It's such a great phenomena, more so I would say than even cinema or movies, but you're the film expert, so I'd let you talk on that.
I
But
think it's
it's just
very
that
similar, to be honest.
it is similar, yeah. And I think the license that you have to create your own mental imagery, I think just gives it that
Mm.
much more of an edge over
Yeah,
cinema. But some people might prefer the
because I did a bit of a research on this years ago. With cinema, it's more like you're sort of watching virtual reality, while with books,
yeah,
you're creating that reality. You're using
yeah,
your imagination. So it's two
yeah,
different things, both
yeah,
super powerful, but very
yeah,
different. And
yeah,
also in the books, you sort of get closer to the characters because you can read their thoughts and get to know them better, I feel. But then
yeah.
again, there's something in films about seeing those characters living through that um, through that virtual reality sort of experience. So it's both very powerful, I would say,
Both are
but
very powerful.
but
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. I think you're right. I mean, and I think like with books, there's intimacy that's created.
Hmm.
Here's the reader and the character, because you're almost developing a relationship to that character as you get to the end of the book, you know.
Plus, it also takes much longer to finish a book, right, than a movie.
Yeah,
So you
it does.
spend
It takes
much more
much
time
longer.
with them.
Yeah, you spend much more time with them. Exactly. It's what at work equates to this. I feel like I have a relationship with them now, you know.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, Whereas in film, you may not feel like you necessarily have a direct relationship with the person on screen. Yeah.
Unless it's Friends, the TV show, where you watch
Yeah.
it like over and over and you feel like they're your
Yeah.
real friends.
Yeah. Unless it's that repetitive. Exactly. Exactly.
Going back to bibliotherapy, important thing for all listeners is that in your book, you have included lists of books for different needs. What do you call these again, these categories?
Mental health themes.
Ah,
So things like anxiety or depression or career change or grief or sadness,
yeah.
all the things that, we as humans have to deal with in our or in all our we're existential beings, and the things that's thrown at us. Um, so yeah, I just call them mental health themes, but there's a list of fiction and non-fiction and poetry for each theme.
And I find them so helpful. But when I was reading them, one question popped into my mind, and that was, how does a bibliotherapist mind work? Like, how do you know all the books? How do you know, like, you have patients with all kinds of problems coming to you, right? And how do
Yeah.
you always like, has it ever happened that there was something you haven't read anything about, or how does it work?
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely requests some days where, I've never come across that before, but luckily I have a bit of a professional network that I can reach out to for different book recommendations. I
Mm,
also have clients who've suggested books that have really helped them because whenever I'm curating personalized book prescriptions, I get clients to fill out books they've loved, and they'll often tell me, "Oh, I really like this book because of this." So over time, I've been able to build up a little bit of a database on, this book for this thing and this theme. That's been super helpful. The professional network's been really helpful. And if failing those two, I do end up going into a bit of a research rabbit hole because I really want to see what industry recommendations are and what the reviews have been about those books. So, it can take me into very different directions
mm,
where I'm heavily researching a subject because I really want to get the right book for the right person, and something that's going to speak to their experience, which, I obviously may not have read, but I really want to make sure it's correct to, suggest something to somebody that you feel is really going to help them. Like it's that life-saving, um, I don't know what you call it, but that lifeboat that they need at the time to really help
mm.
them sail through this choppy ocean that they find themselves in. And it can feel like an ocean when you're overwhelmed with
Yeah.
a really difficult emotion or a really difficult challenge. Um, yeah, so essentially that's sort of how I navigate that. But
So, because we're in a cat coach cafe, what is your relationship to cats? Do you have any personal stories, any experience with cats yourself?
oh yeah, I mean, I have plenty. I mean, growing up in Kenya, I my grandmother had, a whole like cat family. She had like litters of cats, and
Wow.
I often would, go there after school and would be just really keen to go and play with these kittens because I never had them at my house.
Mm,
Um, and so often I'd be looking after them or, feeding them. And so I think, those early memories of cats have always had a really special um, imprint.
mm,
And it's just a time that I associate with being really peaceful and carefree, and these little cats were my friends, and it was just it was a really special time. And now I don't necessarily have that in London with the chaoticness of life and two kids, etc. But I often find myself drawn to cats in literature, or finding that reconnection. And I've been reading a lot of Japanese novels because I love Japanese literature. And
yeah,
one of the things I've noticed is that cats are a recurring theme in so
yeah,
many of these books.
yeah,
I don't know, you probably read a few of them yourself,
yeah,
but they do come up a lot, especially some very recent ones, like the Traveling Cat Chronicles
yeah.
by Arikawa,
It's such a
or
beautiful, powerful book.
yeah, yeah, it's wonderful, like I love some of their themes on like friendship or loyalty or letting go. Um, but also like I Am a Cat by Natsumi Saseki, I think. Really interesting. I mean, the thing about Japanese literature is it just brings out really new perspectives of looking at the world and
Yeah,
the way they use animals, and it's wonderful. So it's been so nice to dive into some of that. And of course you've got things like Kafka on the Shore by Haruki Murakami. I don't know if you've come across that. That's a slightly older one, but cats play a really big role in its sort of strange, like metaphysical landscape, I guess. Um, but yeah, I think if you're really into cats, I think you've got to explore all this Japanese literature
yeah,
that has them in um capturing them in really beautiful ways.
yeah.
Um, the ways that they're so powerful.
Yeah. And it's funny that you say that you're drawn to literature that features cats or it's about cats because I personally, I mean, I have cats, right? So for me, it's natural, sort of. But the more books I read about cats, the more I sort of want to read of these books because I find, especially in difficult times, I'm drawn to these books because, and especially the Japanese ones, I don't know, it's just they bring comfort, I feel, just as in real life when you have cat next to you. It's just somehow that bond is so beautifully recreated in those books and those stories. So whenever there's a cat story, any kind of cat story, for me, that's like the ultimate comfort book, like for hard times or good times, but an ultimate comfort book.
Ah, 100%. I think there's something about cats that teach us how to be happy, you
Yeah,
know, because they don't care about like how much money you make or like, what's my status or like how am I going to get that next job promotion or like do I have the latest this, like they're just so, present and
yeah,
I think there's a lot about happiness that we can learn from a content cat.
yeah, for sure. Yeah,
And I find that really, really fascinating about the natural world. Um, and just taking out all these like man-made things that we've imposed on ourselves, these standards and conditions, um, that say this will let you be happy and this won't. And it's just wonderful to peel off all those layers, and just maybe just be a cat, and operate as a cat.
that's actually the topic of my cat coach diaries. That's what I try to
Yeah.
bring, sort of by observing my cats. I sort of like, yeah, that's why I call it like uncomplicated living for complicated humans because cats
Yes.
just don't do anything that's complicated. So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Like, is it catitude and catfulness that you
Yes,
mentioned?
yes.
Yeah, I love
Yeah,
that. I just think it's
thanks.
such a great philosophy, cat philosophy,
Yes, yeah. I just feel like cats sometimes get really bad reputation, but there's just really so much we can learn from them, and that's really why I even do what I do because I sort of want to
Yeah,
change that like misconception sort of about cats because they are so affectionate and they can teach
yes.
us really so much. They're so bloody smart. It's
They are, they
incredible.
are, exactly. I mean, we always, a lot of people go to dogs, but I think there's so much cats can offer, right? Like,
Yeah,
it's just,
yeah.
it's
And that's
missing.
another thing why the
Yeah,
Japanese literature is so interesting because I feel like they get it. They know.
yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah. And they feature cats in so many of their stories, like their manga and
yeah,
cinema, and they really celebrate it. Yeah, for
yeah.
sure.
And I
Yeah.
feel like there's so many books about life in Japanese literature that don't even feature cats, but they have cats on the cover, at least.
Yeah.
It's so
Yeah,
funny.
that's right. I know. And do you like the musical Cats?
I've never seen that one actually.
Oh, okay, okay. No,
I
that's
know the music, of course, but I've
yeah,
never
yeah,
seen it
yeah, yeah.
actually.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, I mean, it was actually inspired by a poetry collection on cats,
Oh, I
by
see.
T.S. Eliot called Old Possum's Book of Practical Cat, I think. Um, and each poem was like featuring a quirky feline cat. Um, and again, I think it's such a wonderful celebration of the different personalities of cats.
Do you ever reread books?
It's a really interesting question, and it's I have like this thing where I don't like th books always have a special memory, and when I've been reading them, and I always feel like if I reread them, it will spoil my memory of it. It may not, it might
Hmm.
even improve like it may even be a more positive experience, but I always feel like the nostalgia is so great that I'm scared I'm going to spoil that if I go back and read it.
Because it's
It's
sort
like the
of
same thing that I haven't gone back to my university campus because I don't want to spoil my memories of it and the way I remembered it. And I know it's changed a lot, you know.
because it's part
And
of
so,
certain phase, right?
yeah, exactly. It was that special time in my life, and I want to keep it that way. So I'll always use the time I have to read something new. And the
Mm.
novel for me, novelty is so important to function. And so new books bring new novelty and I feel like that's part of my mental self-care, you know.
Plus, there's so many books, right? So
Yeah,
no
and plus
time
it's
to
so short.
reread.
So yeah, and not enough time to read. So exactly.
Going back to this topic of stress relief, would you actually say that fiction is the most stress relieving type of book?
Yeah, look, I think fiction is something that is often so character driven or so plot driven that it really takes you on a journey, you know, which is very different to your own. And I think that is the secret or the magic of a book that just takes you out of your head, relieves some of the anxieties or other things that have been holding occupying space, and gives you a certain freedom and novelty and wonder, all these wonderful emotions that often we don't get to live on our day to day because we're so overwhelmed by all these other emotions. So I think that's why fiction is so incredible in also bringing those emotions out beyond just the ones that you're connecting with or identifying with.
Is there any genre that you don't read? Like, do you read fantasy, for example, or are you open to all genres?
Look, I am open to all genres. It's interesting that you mentioned fantasy because I'm not like it's not the genre that would really crop up for me. I sometimes can find it quite challenging, because I really like the reality of things,
Mm.
and the realness and the authenticity of stories. So I often find fantasy sometimes a little bit harder to connect with. But not to say that there isn't space for them. And for some people, that is the thing that they're connecting with, and that's really important for them to continue reading. But you know, I might have a lot of space fiction, which I don't always kind of, would necessarily, that would never be my
Mm.
go-to read.
Mm.
You know? But a lot of people love that and will ask me for those recommendations and will say like, you know, I'm struggling with this, but I really enjoy reading space fiction. Can you find something? You know, so
Mm.
you know, it's not something I'm averse to, but it would definitely not be like something that I would naturally go to or that would appeal to me.
It's so cool when you give yourself that space to just try anything, because
Yes.
even
Yeah,
if you don't particularly enjoy it, even if it's not gonna become your new favorite genre, it gives you something.
exactly. It teaches you something or brings a new perspective, or like you said, it could just surprise you. And, you
Yeah,
know, all of a sudden you feel like, actually, I really like this, you know?
yeah,
And there's also that element of, you know, you don't know what you don't know. And
yeah, yeah, exactly.
um,
Like, yeah, that's what I was sort of thinking. Like, what if, what if I find something there that's going to enrich my life, right? Because if we don't
yeah,
try, we will never know.
yeah, 100%. And I think I talk about that in the book as well, like book discovery or the surprise of the surprise of book discovery. Um, yeah. And often books find you as well, right? They find
Yeah,
you when you read them the most. That happens
definitely.
to me. I don't know if it happens to you.
Yeah, it does. Even
Um,
with books like that that been lying on my shelf for years and I never picked them up. And then suddenly, for some reason, I just picked them
yeah,
up. And I
yeah,
know that I wasn't meant to read them before, even though I
yeah.
got them like 3 years ago.
I'm yeah. The serendipity of it. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's pretty cool. Yeah.
yeah, it's awesome.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation. And if you'd like to find out more about bibliotherapy and Bijal,
I have included all the necessary links in the show notes. November offers another beautiful feasting opportunity. November 11th is the St. Martin's Day. Historically, this was the end of vegetation period, and that's the economic end of the year when wages were paid and new contracts for the upcoming year were signed or agreed on. This was followed by a celebration with loads of delicious food, including the famous delicious St. Martin mini rolls with walnut filling. I love these, and I have included a recipe into the show notes. You can also find it on my new Substack, checktheRecipe.substack.com, where Czech is spelled as Czech Republic. Based on an old German tradition, huge bonfires were lit, and it was believed these could burn down and chase away any hate, and thus cleared the heart before the Advent time. If you can't exactly make a bonfire on this night, how about lighting a candle and letting go of all the negative feelings and emotions? Once again, this is a great opportunity to grab that journal and let it all out onto the paper. According to Czech folklore, St. Martin arrives on a white horse, meaning that first snow is to be expected. From numerology point of view, 11th of November, 11/11, is a day fit to reflect on whether we live authentically and whether we are fulfilling our purpose. It's a day to focus on ourselves, take some alone time, meditate, and perhaps start something new, as number 1 symbolizes new beginnings, and the 4 ones in this date represent 2 doors, one being the earthly realm, the other one symbolizing the spiritual world. And that's the opportunity to dance between the two and connect to our higher selves. So, what does your higher self want you to do? On the 13th of November is a World Kindness Day, a day we are inspired to do little acts of kindness, which is becoming more and more known in the society. However, do you know the story behind it? It actually came to be as a result of unkindness and negligence, unsurprisingly. When Seiji Kaya, a president of the Tokyo University, was robbed in a train back in the 60s, he was utterly disappointed how many people walked by without helping him. Since then, he started spreading the idea of kinder world, first at his university, then in the city. Seiji Kaya believed that even from a small act of kindness, a huge change can occur. He encouraged the students to do small acts of kindness, which would then create a wave of kindness so strong that it would flood all of Japan. And the wave truly was strong as it became a globally recognized day in 1997. So, what is one, or perhaps more, small acts of kindness you could do today? Perhaps even just being kinder to yourself could go a long way. And that's it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed your time with us. And before you go, don't forget to check out the official Cat Coach Cafe playlist on Spotify to give you those real Cat Coach Cafe vibes whenever you need them. And also, we would absolutely love to see you over on Substack as well as on Instagram at Moniforce and Cat Coach Diaries. And if you enjoyed this episode, please do subscribe, leave a review or rating.
as it helps immensely to reach new audience, and me and the cat coaches would appreciate it so very much. See you in the next episode in 2 weeks' time on November 15th, and until then, stay cozy, stay warm, and cuddle those cats of yours.